Ausrine ARMONAITE, who is the former Minister of Economy of Innovation of Lithuania, who will talk to us about her journey through various crises. Ausrine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Bonjour, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Ausrine ARMONAITE, and I come from Vilnius, Lithuania. I'll start my presentation perhaps with a few sentences about myself. I spent a decade in professional politics, and for the past 4 years, I have served my country as the Minister of Economy and Innovation. For around 8 years, I was a member of parliament, and I started my political career as the city councillor. Now I'm transferring to a new chapter of my career, and I'm very grateful for the Paris Institute for Advanced Study for this opportunity to contemplate what happened while I was in the office, and what lessons can we learn from that, from my experience, but also from the broader European experience. So I will share my screen with you and see that. So if we take a look at the past 15 years in Europe, it was crisis after crisis, be it internal or somewhere externally, but very close to us. If someone anticipates that, okay, we will, normal times will come back and we'll get back to business as usual, my message is that it won't be so. The normal times are over, and policymakers have to recognize this and deal with it. So let's just very briefly take a look. 2008, we had financial crisis with all the implications and everything that followed it. 2014, Russia took part of Ukraine and caused difficult dilemmas among the European leaders. Sanctions were implemented and so on. 2015, we had a huge influx of migration coming from the Middle East and Africa to Europe. 2016 Brexit vote, that was also followed by the whole process of Brexit negotiations, and us Europeans, we had to figure out how to live in the European Union without our very important ally, the United Kingdom. 2020 COVID pandemic, and everybody still remembers what happened at that time. Now in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion against Ukraine with different kind of implications that we still feel here in the neighborhood, let alone the continuous climate crisis. So all these events, they shape us as who are we now, and it has significant effect for our economies, political systems, and of course our mental health. Now, my personal experience was related to 3 crisis situations. As a minister, I was responsible for COVID measures, and basically my job and my aim, as I understood it back then, was actually to open our economy as fast as possible, but at the same time, to balance the decisions, because we also had to contain the virus and to reduce the cases of COVID. I was the one, me and my team, we were responsible for the so-called national certificate and its introduction. And it were very difficult, tough decisions we made at that time, and encountered a lot of criticisms. I'll perhaps elaborate about it more later. Now, while COVID-19 is known everywhere, perhaps not that many know about the Chinese coercive measures that they applied to our exports and bilateral trade. So just a few sentences about it. Since the 1st of December 2021, a country called Lithuania simply disappeared from the electronic customs system in China. This meant that all the exports, beverages, food, technologies that was already exported couldn't get into Chinese market, and also basically the whole trade stopped. It was shock and confusion. I won't go into much detail about why they did it, but basically it was a huge uncertainty across the competitive, across the investment climate, and obviously it affected our competitiveness at that time. Now, I already mentioned the war that is still going on in Ukraine, but what we dealt in particular was also energy price inflation that was caused by this war. And if you remember the year 2023, it was a huge inflation in the Eurozone. And in some parts of Europe, for instance, the Baltic states where I come from, it reached double digits. At some point that year, our inflation was 18 or 20%. Just imagine how high that was. And it was not driven by the oversupply of money that was in the market, but it was mainly driven by the energy cost that was really high because, well, the demand was high, the supply was low. And well, just because us Lithuanians, but also Europeans, we stopped buying gas and electricity from Russia. Then it got way more expensive, and we had to deal with it. So for the record, I must say that we withstood all of these turbulent situations, and we maintained stable economic growth. And now I'm going to share what I have learned personally, and perhaps what us as decision makers or previous decision makers could also sort of take out of these experiences. So, despite the very different nature of all of these crises, it was pandemic or some external events and decisions, what I have realized that there are some very common stages and patterns that reoccur. First, obviously, it is shock, uncertainty, and chaos. Then we need temporary measures to be implemented to buy us some time. While and in the meantime, when we bought some time, then we have to work out for the long-term solutions to address the issues in the long run. It has to be made in parallel. And then every crisis is also a huge window for opportunity. And we should not waste those crises while just only managing them. We have to create something out of it. So I'll just go one by one, perhaps explaining how it was when it comes to my experience. And I believe these are quite universal experiences. So first stage, when the crisis hits, obviously everybody is in shock. People are afraid. There is uncertainty and chaos. And we live in this very we live in the social media world where basically it is very easy to share your views. And what we realize is that, okay, everybody knows how to deal with all these crises. Everyone becomes a pandemic expert or an economist knowing global trends, or as we sometimes say, also football and basketball referee. So there are a lot of contradictory remarks, even in the public arena, not only social media that I mentioned, but also traditional media. And, you know, for us as human beings, it's natural for us to sort of pursue affection, right? Us human beings, we want to be liked. And politicians, decision makers as well, we want to be liked. It is tempting, you know, to pay too much attention into what people are talking about your decisions and what should you do. But my message is that you shouldn't pay too much attention to this noise, because then you'll get paralyzed and it will be impossible for you to basically go further and you know, deal with these crises and find solutions. So during each turbulent situation, it is important not to pay too much attention to this noise, but at the same time, it is important to reach out the public, explain your decisions. And well, in my case, it was also not only wider public, but also business organizations, companies, business associations, and so on. It is important to maintain the contact with the media, both the public hearing briefings, but also off the record briefings, and so on. And when it comes to political landscape, what is also quite evident, it was evident during my experience, is that not everybody wants you to succeed, obviously, right? So if there is a crisis situation in some private companies, the teams are, you know, they put themselves together and they deal with it together. In politics, sometimes one minister may look for a solution and the other guy may simply don't want you know, you to find the solution, or within the coalition partners. So this also has to be kept in mind. Now, when it comes to temporary measures to buy time, I purposely put this picture here because through the past 4 or 5 years, it was mostly Europe that needed to act. But from my personal experience across these crises, I'm sort of elaborating on, is that in the very first weeks of each critical situation, United Europe does not exist. Yes, we do have a single market and we do have rules, but when gas and electricity prices are skyrocketing across Europe, each and every government is planning their own measures. And to maintain the level playing field for everybody is actually very difficult. And it is important that these people, President von der Leyen and her previous colleagues at that commission, the previous mandates commission, take action. So just imagine when a government of Germany or Poland, these big countries, they pour hundreds of billions of euros into their economy to maintain the competitiveness of their manufacturers. Just imagine that smaller countries and smaller companies can suffer. This meant that we, smaller governments, we had to do the same. We had to follow them. And basically, that's what we did. We launched huge state aid schemes, both when it comes to financial instruments, loans, but also subsidies and so on. And just only afterwards, we worked out the common European approach of how to deal with it. Same with COVID and others. Now, when we bought some time, for us. We sent the message that, okay, we are taking care of the competitiveness and we are dealing with the crisis. Let's work on the long-term solutions. And these long-term solutions in my practice involved, obviously, the successful vaccination numbers and the complete lifting on quarantine regarding COVID. As for Chinese coercive measures, we diversified our exports. Basically, we put more attention into the rest of Asian Pacific markets, countries like Australia, Japan, India, South Korea, Singapore, Indonesia, Taiwan, Vietnam, and others. And we try to increase our presence there so that we wouldn't be dependent on Chinese market and our exports there. Also, working with other like-minded markets and countries like our the Eurozone, European friends, and also the US. As it comes to energy price inflation, we launched the National Energy Independence Strategy that aimed for us to become not only a producer of energy, but also have an oversupply of energy, so that in the long run we could basically export it to the rest, to our neighbors, to the rest of the region. That's how we won't be, too much dependent on some external markets and external partners. As I said in the very beginning, every crisis situation also brings some opportunities you could achieve, and there were some very particular achievements that the common effort dealing with these crises brought. As for COVID, the research and development globally increased, and for instance, in my country, the biotechnology sector grew in double digits. For instance, I'll just give you a few figures. In the year 2020 to 2023, we had an average growth of 22%. So it was double-digit growth, and currently it comprises around 3% of our GDP, while the European average is 1%. As for dealing with Chinese coercive measures, we successfully diversified to other markets, and basically we managed to offset the exports that was previously went to China. So it increased by 60% to the Indo-Pacific countries. As for energy, price inflation, obviously, we have learned that energy efficiency and investing into greener energy, becoming more climate neutral and aware, it is not only good for the planet, but it also saves money. And if someone was very reluctant to do that earlier, now they are more eager to do that, and that's very important. And also, it was an opportunity for sectors that are not really energy intense to prove themselves. For instance, the IT services grew, and basically, as for the case of Lithuania, it saved our economy and exports and GDP in the times of crisis when our manufacturers had some bad days. Now I will try to stop here, perhaps stop sharing the screen, and we'll share some final thoughts regarding the presentation. I have two main messages out of what we've seen and what I'm elaborating here at the Institute, is that the only clear thing about the future is that we don't know what will happen. And it may sound a little bit depressing, or I don't know, not that very optimistic, let's put it this way. But on the positive note, I want to stress that our experience with those crises, it showed some reoccurring patterns, some common stages that all these turbulent situations share. And knowing that, you may find your way out of it sooner, sooner than perhaps before. This is what I felt serving my country as the cabinet minister. This is what I'm taking out of the experience. And I think that this is some universal things that we have to keep in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ausrine. This is fascinating to hear from, I apologize for this expression, from the mouth of the horse, right? How it is to have to tackle these things. And this resonates so much. We've had for the past few years this series here of acting in times of crisis. And it's exactly what you're saying. It starts with the shock and the mess, and then you try to gain time, and then you try to address the problem. And what strikes me now is that since we know this, I mean, this means that any crisis has two aspects. One is the crisis management per se, and the other one is to address the problem that led to the crisis, right? And so this gaining time and addressing the crisis takes a lot of energy, and it's complicated because everybody's panicked. So I mean, the lessons here are seem to be rather simple. So first you have to start thinking about the problems, because we know the problems in advance very often. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but we know about this. And so we can prepare for solutions. Very often the problem of governments, whether they're local or national or even institutional, is that they know the solutions, but they can't apply them. And what we know from changes and from like Cote-Levin's model is that first you need to unfreeze the situation, then you change it, then you get a new refreeze. And the crises are an opportunity for implementing these new solutions, right? And so there's the first thing is that let us prepare solutions for the problems we know and wait for a crisis to implement them, right? And the second thing is let us prepare for crisis management. I was involved in one crisis about, a massive blackout of electricity in France caused by a major storm. And it turned out that EDF, the National Electricity, had prepared, it was in the December 1999, they had prepared for a crisis, but not for that one. They had prepared for a crisis of the Y2K bug. But because they had this preparation, they were able to manage much better because they had addressed the crisis situation as a major disruption and they could manage it. And so my amazement is that since all governments know this, right, do they have, preparation for crisis and preparation for problems, with the kind of solution to build back better, as we say, right? Is this something that you found in place? Is this something that you have set up? And if yes, how? And if not, why?
Well, first of all, there are some crises we know that will happen, and there are crises we have no idea about. So I think that Europe is already waking up, or already woke up to my view, because especially it's very evident when it comes to energy sector, right? We were building our economies, us as Europeans, dependent on cheaper electricity resource, not only electricity, but energy resources coming from Russia. And for many governments, like, I don't know, in previous governments of Germany and so on, it just simply made sense, right? We will buy cheaper, we'll be more competitive. But then what we are learning as we are muddling through these turbulent times now is that, okay, sometimes price in the long term is higher. And Greta Thunberg, a girl from Sweden, now she's a young woman, right? She was actually right. These green transformation reforms are not only because of the planet, they are mainly because of preserving it, but it is also because of our competitiveness and basically living a better life in a more sustainable way. So my answer is both yes and no. Yes, for instance, the government I worked in, and it ended its mandate. We have learned a lot during COVID. And actually, when other things happen, for instance, the war against Ukraine, we made some very concrete measures when it comes to public security, public safety, and so on. And these were based on our lessons that we learned during COVID. COVID was a very tough and comprehensive on so many levels experience that the rest was okay. We know how to do it. It's a bit different, but some of the things they keep reoccurring. I hope I answered the question, but I come from politics, so.
No, yes, you do. And so does this specific structure have a name or people who are constantly, working on this?
Oh, yes, it is in the Prime Minister's office. Actually, the whole organization is under the Prime Minister's office, and it deals now with everything, with the security of the infrastructure or other things.
Thank you very much. We have Gordon, and then we'll have Barry. Gordon.
Okay, well, thank you for a great talk. I really enjoyed that. I would like to interview you at some point on COVID, but I'm not going to ask you about COVID just now. You gave the impression that Lithuania was making decisions and that the big player in the background was the European Union, and I'm sure that is clear. But what about the Baltic states? To what extent, in response to crises, did you liaise with the Baltic states? I know that the Nordic states often get together before dealing with the EU, and there is strength in that. And then conversely, when there is a crisis, what about when, and I'm not talking about you specifically, but people in your government who really don't know how to deal with the crisis, blaming others and shifting responsibility, because that's another response to a crisis. It's not our fault, somebody else's fault. And electorally, a crisis can be very damaging as well. Did you see any instances of blaming or blame avoidance behavior over this period?
Thank you. Great questions. Let me reveal a little bit about small country strategies when it comes to European regulation. Of course, we build, or we are building, or we are part of the alliances before every decision. And it's not only Baltic states, but normally we coordinate within the Nordic Baltic format, as it is the same neighborhood, but also we coordinate quite often systematically with the Benelux countries, because these are countries that have similar interests. They want a more competitive single market, and sometimes decisions by big countries' government can affect your business just like that, right? Now, when it comes to avoidance of responsibility, I would read your question this way. Sometimes and very often in politics, there are those who are trying to take care of the matter. Okay, let's just deal with it and let's get out of it. Let's achieve some concrete results. And there are those who just simply want to comment other people's work. And basically, they are avoiding the responsibility. And it happens not only in the parliament where everybody just speaks, right? Well, not only speaks, but also, of course, shares ideas. But it is happening also, I think, all the time within the coalition governments, when some of the actors in the coalition are trying to propose something, the others simply are either not supporting, or it might be their responsibility, but they are simply avoiding it and trying to basically put their job to somebody else. And I'm not saying that I was surprised about it, but for many times I was struck that it happens, and it kept happening. And I think it happens everywhere. It just that's how it is. This is that kind of industry politics is.
Thank you. Sobering. Barry.
Thank you, Saudi, and thank you, Ausrine. I read your original proposal. I was very impressed by it, and it is very refreshing to see you here as a fellow pracademic. I also really lovely, and all of us, I suppose, come to the various things we look at through a certain lens. And I'm a time theorist and I'm a process theorist, and it occurs to me as I look at what you talk about here that there's a very nice temporal lens that can go over a lot of what you've talked about in these 4 phases. And this is more an observation than it is a question. But one thing that really struck me was the second of your phases, and thinking about the second of those phases as buying time. Okay. And just how powerful that is. And Saudi alluded to it in his observation also, because I think there really is, that everybody is scrambling for a solution at that stage. And initially, sort of solutions come about and people almost default to think that they will be the intermediate to long term. But actually, your way of looking at this and the notion of buying time has really, quite profound implications in terms of how you manage a crisis like this, let alone get to the 4th stage of seeing it as an opportunity. So I thought it was really, really nice. And maybe it's a way, and I put it as a pitch, as you think of your time over the next 3 weeks, that, time or process may be sort of the framework you might think about. I don't know what frameworks you are thinking about to put on top of this. That might be sort of a way of sort of sense making this in sort of more generally, so to speak. But anyway, it was wonderful to listen to you, and I'm very very interested to see where you come out.
Thank you so much. This second stage, temporary measures to buy time, I just realized it after 2 of those crises, COVID and China. So when the electricity prices were skyrocketing, and I remember I visited the second city of Lithuania, the industrialists there. And just to give you a very short picture of how our economy looks like, it's 24% of our GDP comes from the manufacturing industries, and it's chemicals, other industries, some are very traditional, like furniture. Others are high tech. But I remember that discussion where it felt like, okay, factories are going down just in front of me. And I realized that, wait a minute, I was there already. I wasn't there before. It was COVID that just happened. It was China that just happened. And I already had these discussions. We have to buy time. And while buying that time, while you are working on these financial instruments, in my case, but obviously in some other cases perhaps different, the main thing is to basically send the message that you're on it, you're on it, and yeah, long-term solutions may take time, but we are on it and we are working on it, and well, finances will be allocated or some other solutions will be in place. And when we live in this very intertwined world, and it's all connected, you know, expectations are key. It may influence everything, especially in a global economy. So it is important to send a message while you are trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ausrine and Barry, for putting that up. You know, I'm an old person now, and one of the very few things I've learned along my career is to play with time. I mean, things take time, and you have to let the solutions develop. And as Ausrine said, the fascinating thing is that the future can impact the present. When you announce you're going to lay off people, it's like they're already away and the sorrow starts, even if it's in 1 year. But if you show that the solution is going to come, then people can wait and hold. And so this idea that you should both be aware of things take time to develop, but that a future representation can have impact in the present is most important. And I understand that that's what you have been doing, not only in your policy, but even in the way you set up your strategy, because you can reassure yourself that we will be able to overcome that because we've already done it, right? So that's, I mean, that's an absolutely great lesson. And this is also full of hope for us now, because we know that we are now in a continuous crisis, and it's not going to get better in terms of problems, but we still may have solutions, because we know that over time things can get better. To continue the discussion we had at lunch today, Ausrine, about Colombia and how you can get back from chaos. And